Justice for mothers. Justice for all who mother. Putting in the care work, mothers. Adoptive mothers. Adaptive mothers. Justice for mothers on the Zoom. Those still not in the room. Mamas on the front line. Moms working overtime. Justice for the persistent, the consistent, the resilient. Let's see the strength she carries. Help her rise up. Justice for your mother, for your mother's mother, for the greats and the great greats. Justice for our future mothers, because when mothers rise, they lift the world.
Toronto is home to Indigenous people, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet and work on this territory. But I recognize that land acknowledgements are not enough. We need to pursue truth, reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in an ongoing effort to make right with all our relations. By way of background, the Canadian Women's Foundation is Canada's public foundation for gender equality. We support diverse women, girls, and gender diverse people to move out of poverty, out of violence, and into confidence and leadership. We were founded 30 years ago, and since then, we've moved more than 130 million to every region in Canada to support thousands of people, communities, and organizations. Since April, we've been focusing particularly on mothers and family caregivers through the Mother Rising campaign. We've shined a spotlight on the burdens they carry, which are worsened by the pandemic, and we're calling to make change to make things better. First of all, we learned about what they're going through. We explored research, we did a national poll and an online survey, and the response has been just incredible. We'll share a bit of that with you today. We'll also then move into a discussion with some mothers in our community. And at the end, you'll get a link to an online survey. We really want to hear what you thought about this and what you'd like to see next. All along the way, we'll get your input and we'll do a prize draw. But before we get to that, here are two mothers sharing their experiences. Please watch this.
I hope you're well. Speaking as a solo parent to a special needs child, the pandemic has been extremely difficult to buffer financially and time-wise. I was on medical leave myself for a large part of the first year of the pandemic, and I'm now launching a business while maintaining full-time caregiving roles and online school responsibilities. And like many of you, this is that impossible challenge of fitting two things into the space allocated for one. Maintaining tuition costs for my son so that his special needs can be met, because the public system doesn't meet them, has also been a tremendous source of stress and responsibility at this time.
My name's Megan, first-time mom to a wonderful 20-month-old. The pandemic has really highlighted for me the need for workplace policies that are family-friendly and family-focused. My employer was incredibly supportive upon my return to work in the fall and was able to accommodate me working when and how I needed to, as the bulk of the childcare responsibilities fell on my shoulders for the first 4 months until we found daycare. My husband hasn't been as fortunate in his situation. I also know that if I was compensated more for the work that I do, that my husband would be able to take a break and focus on finding a workplace that aligned more with how we want our family to function. And that would alleviate a great deal of stress here at home.
Thank you, Sabrina and Megan. My name is Suzanne Duncan, and I am so grateful to be the Vice President of Philanthropy at the Canadian Women's Foundation. In this role, I have the amazing opportunity to listen to stories of people like you who are taking action for gender equity. I also have the great responsibility of ensuring that every one of you understands the depth of the impact you make when you support the Canadian Women's Foundation. This past month, reading these surveys, reading these polls, it's been humbling, and it's actually, frankly, been heartbreaking. Mothers and caregivers have shared difficult experiences in the pandemic. And I want you to know, if you are struggling, you are not alone. I'm going to be sharing some of our survey responses with you today. It's not just mothers with young kids who've had a rough time. Everyone who is caring for others has been affected. For example, in response to our survey, a caregiver to a mother and grandchild in Alberta told us, "My parent doesn't qualify for provincial health supports. This prompted us to relocate to be closer to my parent, but now access to healthcare and home care services are disrupted or closed because of staff shortages. The situation in long-term care is frightening, and I am sacrificing my business and career development and also my retirement savings, which were also very low. Our elder care experience was not included in the long-form census. To be present and to assume self-managed elder care and aging in place is a gift, but acknowledgement of unpaid caregiving and supports would benefit us all." No, I couldn't agree more with this sentiment. And we're hearing so much about the challenges on the ground through our local community partners. For example, Leah Evangelista Woolner, who is one of our grantee partners from Le Mouvement contre le viol et l'inceste, which supports trafficked migrant women in Quebec. She said this: "We need affordable childcare for all. We need a living wage where people can live decently. We need systems that take into consideration the real life problems that women face and support them in being able to make the best decisions they can for themselves." Leah goes on to say, "Growing up as part of the Filipino diaspora, migrant caregiver issues and other challenges facing migrants are always important to me. I'm motivated by my community and so many strong women who have helped me reimagine a society with much more equitable distribution of wealth and power." Absolutely, Leah, well said. These quotes are a powerful reminder of how far we have to go. Women and gender diverse people have had to shoulder much of the burden of this pandemic, and they need help. If you are able, please consider making a gift of any size to the Mother Rising at themotherrising.ca. Your help will provide essential funding to organizations for women, girls, and gender diverse people. The link to give is on the slide and also in the chat box, and your support will be deeply appreciated. Now, I also have a question for you. We're going to ask some polls through the day, and here comes a poll for you right now. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not at all and 5 is a lot, how has your mental health been impacted over the course of this year? Please answer the poll while we go back to Andrea and talk to a little bit more about what family caregivers and mothers have told us.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. So I'd just like to share a bit about what we've heard from people like you. We've heard some little vignettes from Suzanne, and we really did this work because we wanted to find out what mothers and family caregivers are going through and what needs to happen to make things better. So we know in a normal context that unpaid caregiving is an issue, and it's a gendered issue. Statistics Canada has for years showed that women have carried the bulk of childcare, elder care, and housework. And the pandemic has intensified this. In the paid caregiving market, women have also made up the bulk of that as well. Physio, elder care, childcare, nursing, schooling, direct services in shelters, housing, community health centers, community legal centers. A lot of this work tends to be lower paid and precarious. It's often done by racialized women, migrant women, younger women, and women who face high barriers and marginalization. So in the pandemic context, we've seen some hints already. There's a lot of research out there now. We're seeing that mothers have taken on the equivalent of essentially 2 full-time jobs when it comes to their paid work and their unpaid work. The amount of hours has been astronomical. We've also seen a high level of depression and anxiety, particularly felt by women and particularly by mothers. So I think this is a good indication that the state of things is not great. And let's go to the next slide and see what our poll said. We did a poll with mothers in Canada and parents actually in Canada, looking at the difference between what different groups said. This was done by our partner, Maru Matchbox, and we thank them very much for supporting us in this. This was a randomly selected sample of 399 parents. It was a representative sample of the population across Canada. So we're seeing these pieces that are very concerning. 46% of mothers say they're reaching their breaking point. 70% are concerned about family mental health. 3 in 5 wish they could make their mental health more of a priority. 27% are afraid to take time off of work or they might lose their job. And 46% say it's been exhausting to balance their paid work and their childcare responsibilities. Next slide, please. We see that significantly more mothers than fathers agree to these statements, that they've had to put their career on the back burner to manage home and parenting responsibilities, that they've had to do more than their spouse when it comes to managing children's schedules and activities and education and making arrangement for children when schools are closed. When we go to the next slide, we see some pieces around what this means on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, on a mental level. We see women or mothers more than fathers saying that they're anxious, that they're afraid, isolated, sad, feeling hopeless, feeling angry. Again, these are certainly mirrored in the mental health surveys that we've seen come out through many different sources. So let's go to the next slide. We've also done an online survey to go alongside this poll. This survey opened in late April and went all the way up to June. It was a short and simple online survey, 9 questions. 254 people responded in English and in French, most of which lived in Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. And most of the respondents are between 35 and 44-year-old. And they're also taking care of young people between 0 and 14, newborn and 14. And what we've seen is that they ranked these different areas of what would make the most positive difference in their life today. You can see that there's some ones that really stand out: affordable childcare, better care for work or better pay for work, and family-friendly workspaces. If we go to the next slide, we see another ranking that people looked to. What would be the biggest barriers that you face today? We've seen people say childcare concerns, not a surprise there. Income barriers, employment barriers, not a surprise. What was a little bit more surprising for me was seeing how high things like education barriers, transportation barriers, and discrimination also ranked. So for me, this was a really big learning that we can't just focus on economics and childcare, like perhaps what we talk about on a governmental level. All these interrelated issues absolutely matter. Not a surprise when I say it like that, but certainly this is confirming how important it is for us to look at it in that complicated lens with lots of different concerns. Let's go to the next slide. Some more voices that we're hearing from mothers. People actually filled out a free form questions or just free areas where they could say what they were feeling. These are ones that really stood out to me, though all of them were very insightful. One person says, our whole family's mental health has decreased, but we have to put food on the table and we have to do what we have to do to make that possible. Another said, it's very difficult and exhausting to work full-time. My husband works full-time and we juggle watching 3 children under the age of 6. Another said, all the lives blend together. I'm usually running from meetings to making snacks to trying to get everything so my family can eat dinner at a reasonable time. And I'm one of the lucky ones with some family help with childcare during the pandemic. Honestly, for the women doing it completely solo, I have no idea how they're managing. And another person said this, which I thought was so important to listen to. I'm at the bottom of the importance list. My kids and family and husband are first. I try to do everything to make them feel okay, feel happy, be comfortable with the chaos COVID created, and have nothing left for me. So I just want to thank you very much for sharing your words. It's just a small snapshot of the things that we heard from people, and taking the time to do that, we are very appreciative. Let's go to the next slide. What's the next step? We heard a lot of amazing things, a lot of important things, a lot of sad things. We saw where people would feel changes need to happen. We saw how they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're concerned about. So what's the Canadian Women's Foundation going to do with this very important information? First, we're going to prepare to learn more in 2022. We're really mindful that the pandemic is part of the story, but it's not the full story. This stuff was happening from before. So in 2022, we will do another temperature check, so to speak, on mothers and family caregivers. And we'll also take some more time to learn how different groups of women, two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people are experiencing things differently depending on their identities and the region where they live. The second thing we're going to do is integrate learnings into our systemic change efforts. An important part of the role of the Canadian Women's Foundation is to contribute to better public policy and governmental responses. This information we shared or we learned, along with all the other research we've been seeing, is very useful towards this end. The third thing we're going to do is share our learnings with grantee partners. So the foundation supports many organizations that provide important services to women, girls, and gender diverse regions, or people in every region of Canada. This is very important as they continue to respond to community needs, and we're going to share this information with them so that they can learn from it as well. Finally, we're going to integrate these learnings into our strategic plan. We're here to move Canada closer to gender equality and justice through excellent grant making and systemic change efforts. These learnings help us steer those efforts into the right directions. So I just want to, next slide, extend our deepest thanks again to everyone who shared their voices. It's just the start of a conversation, and it's really about valuing care work of all kind and valuing the carers while we're at it as well too. It's a human rights and human dignity issue. It goes to their core as individuals, as families, and as a society. Whether or not we like it, we are all connected. It's not just a mother issue. It's not a gender issue alone. It's not a woman's issue alone. It's an everybody's issue. So let's work together and act accordingly. Now we're going to watch another video of two mothers sharing their experiences. Thank you. We might be having a bit of technical difficulty. That's okay. So maybe what we'll do is move on to Suzanne with your piece, and we'll get back to that other video.
Hi there, I'm a single mom of a 1-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. When I returned from baby number 1, pregnant with my second, I was removed from projects as I could not accommodate very early mornings and very late nights due to the hours of daycare and my pregnancy appointments. I did not return to my position, but placed in odds and end jobs until I was off again with my second mat leave. Meanwhile, my mat leave replacement kept my position. After baby number 2, I ensured that I still had my position to come back to. Only 3 days before I was going to start, I was completely removed from my level of management and placed in a completely different role with over 10% of my pay cut. I now struggle with bills and daycare payments. We need to start seeing better working environments for our mothers or women who are family planning. A pregnancy should never be viewed as a fault within a woman's performance. I feel that women today are still making such a marginal gap within their pay structures and only to have more of a disadvantage with career setbacks like a maternity leave. Companies need to foster their working mothers by adding compensation for childcare to their benefit packages, really ensuring that we are entitled to our role when we return. I would like to see women on the rise speak up, share their stories of injustice and lack of support from their working environments. This all falls under discrimination at work, and it's time we had our voices heard.
Hi, my name is Selena, and I'm the parent of a 15-year-old daughter who's doing school online right now. I'm also working and doing school online myself. The biggest challenge I'm facing right now is balancing family expectations with my work obligations. There's still this expectation that you prioritize work over family. And unfortunately, there are many of us, many women, who have unpaid labor responsibilities at home. And that burden falls on us to reduce our working hours or our workload, which comes with a reduction in pay, making it really difficult to make ends meet.
I'm so glad we got to see those videos. Thank you so much, Selena and Jennifer, for sharing your stories with us. You know, with increased health risks, program closures, and stay-at-home orders, the pandemic has placed exceptional burdens on women with disabilities and caregivers of people with disabilities. For example, a mother of 2 in Nova Scotia told us, women who are caregivers of children with disabilities face a different set of barriers: reliable, customized childcare and respite support, mental health services, economic challenges, burnout. These are the barriers to our family's well-being and our family's functioning. Absolutely. And this is just one of many stories we heard about how people with disabilities have been left out during the pandemic and how challenging it's been to provide caregiving without those tailored supports in place. So I have another poll for you. I'd like to know about the caregiving that you're doing. We'd like to know, how many hours a week do you spend tending to caregiving needs? If you could answer that in the poll, that would be great. And now that you have your fingers on your keyboards, it's time to give away a great prize from our friend and supporter, Beauty for Good, a hair and beauty e-commerce platform on a mission to empower women. For more information about this company, please visit beautyforgood.ca. Beauty for Good has donated a wonderful gift basket with a value of over $400. And here's how you can win it. I'm going to ask a question, and whoever is the first to answer the question in the chat will win the prize. Here's the question. Is everybody ready? Okay, here we go. According to the national survey conducted by the Canadian Women's Foundation and Meru Matchbox, what percentage of women said they are reaching their breaking point? I'll give you a moment to get that into the chat. Okay. Oh, we've got some correct answers. It's right. 46% of women said they are reaching their breaking point. And we're going to get in touch with the winner right after the event to arrange shipping. Now back over to Andrea.
My turn again. Thank you very much, Suzanne. And I just want to take a second to say thank you to my incredible colleagues. They're doing the magic behind the screen to make everything run smoothly and showing the videos and the presentations. So we really appreciate all your support to make this happen today. Our president and CEO, Paulette Sr., recently had a really insightful discussion with mothers in the Foundation's community. It included 4 people, Soala Amana in Ontario and Chelsea Stellick in Alberta. These are 2 friends and supporters of the Foundation. It also included Lady Laforet, Executive Director at the Welcome Centre Shelter for Women and Families in Windsor, Ontario, one of our grantee partners at the Canadian Women's Foundation. The discussion also included Andrea Dix, CEO at Community Foundations of Canada, a partner of the Canadian Women's Foundation. As women leaders of 2 national philanthropic organizations, Paulette and Andrea were really interested in the insights of our panelists to be able to bring the lessons back to their important work. So please take a look at this video.
What really has been your experience in the pandemic as a mother, family caregiver, and what are some of the core challenges that you've been dealing with?
This is my son, Ivor. He was born on March 8th, so he's only 10 weeks old. So there was a lot of complications with him. He was in the NICU for 9 days, for instance, and now he is in a brace and pending a surgery in a couple months. So he's had a rough little go to the first couple months of life. But not only that, like during the pregnancy, there are quite a few complications on my side as well. And before that, prior to him, we actually had a miscarriage. So it's been quite the journey. And this was all, I think we got pregnant February 2020 and with the first child. And obviously the pandemic hit March 2020. And so this whole time we have been in our, childhood journey with during the pandemic. And so, wow, not having the opportunity to have support in the same way that we probably would have sans pandemic, that has been a major challenge. Obviously only one parent can come in to see the physician at a time. We have probably 3 to 4 doctor visits a week with Ivor. So, juggling between my husband and I, trying to get him to his physio appointments, the hip specialists and whatnot. So it's been quite the ride. And one of the things for me that I would say is the biggest core challenge is the fact that we don't have these mother support groups that, I would have had access to not in a pandemic era. I mean, we can have support groups via Zoom, but it's not quite the same when your child can't actually interact with another baby and you can't interact with another mother in the same physical way. And especially someone who's going through the same thing. So that's it's been quite the ride, and that's the major challenges. I summed up.
Sometimes we think Mother's Day, and it's one day, but this year at the foundation we're making it much more robust and want to bring the real experiences forward. So thank you so much, Chelsea, for sharing that experience with us.
Like Chelsea, it feels like the past year and a half, your whole life becomes months. You know, people remember the months of things. That February, March was when COVID was hitting, and it was, you know, March was COVID. April, my father was diagnosed with cancer. June, he started treatment. August, we started hospice. September, he passed. October, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. About 3 weeks, a month ago, she passed. So it was caregiving was like the theme of my life for about a year. And then combine that with two rambunctious girls who are grade school age and who were at home. One doing at-home learning, one who we actually flipped to at-home schooling on our own. And it just, to me, the theme constantly of caring, and how that old feminist adage of the second shift felt like it just became the never-ending shift. I think for me, it was really about just setting clear boundaries and really trying to balance that lovely age-old mother's guilt that I was never quite doing anything as well as I wanted to be. I wasn't a supportive enough daughter. I wasn't, you know, being a good enough mom. I wasn't the best ED that I could be. It seemed like there was a constant list of things that it felt like you could be doing better at. And a lot of it, I think, relates to what Chelsea was saying, was that lack of the social supports not being there. That I would have went to a mother support group for my kids. I would have went to tutoring groups. I would have went to just an open motherhood support group. I probably would have went to some in-person, you know, grief counseling groups. And so that lack of social connection, I think, was just really the biggest challenge for sure, like for everybody.
I just want to say so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story.
To give a bit of context, I would say myself and my family are new immigrants to Canada. So we moved just a couple of months before, just a handful of months before the pandemic. And I am extremely grateful, you know, to be a mother and a caregiver to my family, but it's been extremely challenging. It's been a constant cycle of exhaustion, trying to balance, work, chores around the house. Most of it I probably put on myself. There's this, I probably set high expectations for myself or make myself feel like I need to do it all, from, the 9 to 5 to the two little ones, to the virtual learning, to cooking, cleaning, just trying to take up everything and be there for every member of my family. But given everything that is happening, there's so many distractions. So maybe something at work that could take me 30 minutes will end up taking, much longer. But still also trying to create time for the family and be present. So it's been challenging. And then just, with the added flavor of being a new immigrant, I feel like, my social network or social bubble is not that great, or well, not that large. So just having that support that you can call despite the pandemic, for a couple minutes, like just getting an hour for yourself, really, it was not really available. And that mother's guilt, trying to be there for the kids, trying to provide for them as best as you can, and personally feeling like maybe you haven't reached the mark. Just it's it's been a big part of the emotions I felt during this pandemic.
I'm going to ask my friend and comrade Andrea Dix, who's going to ask the next question. So over to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Paulette. And thank you all for sharing your stories with such honesty. It's really an honor to witness this conversation and to be part of today's important dialogue. I'm curious if you have witnessed an upside in any of the public conversations that are taking place around mothering and caregiving.
Like for me, I think back to like the initial months when anything and everything that people were bringing to the shelter, which is where I work, was things to thank us for being heroes. And so, and not, it's fantastic and everyone's doing great work, and definitely, but there's a part of me that went like, we're doing the same things that we were doing a month before this pandemic, but now suddenly, obviously, like the light is shining brighter on it. But for the first time, instead of just shining a light into the gap and doing individual stories about women, it was finally taking a second for the bigger story to go, why was this big hole here for all these women to fall into the first place? And what do we do to get rid of the gap so that women don't keep falling into it?
I see that too, and I'm optimistic that the efforts for many years of folks like those who are connected to the Canadian Women's Foundation, that the efforts that they have been taking are now at a place where that spotlight, as you said, is going to catalyze more action and really tangible action to address the systemic failures that we've been living with.
I would say they haven't really been specific to mothering or caregiving as they cut across everyone, but I would definitely say there's been a heightened conversation on mental health. And the pandemic has definitely brought that to the forefront and shone a light on that. Now there's even across the schools that our kids go to, right? Their courses, their webcast learnings on how to deal with the mental state of our kids, of the mothers, of the primary caregivers. And I think that having that conversation being brought to the forefront is good, because it was maybe like in the dark and not everyone, almost in some instances a taboo subject, but more and more people are open to talking about it and sharing some of the experiences they have which they previously may not have, and then realizing that it's okay to say this is going on, and to take some time for yourself, or to seek some specialist help, or just have some kind of support system. So that I would say is one of the main upsides that I've seen.
Yeah, and definitely in terms of upsides, one of the things I've noticed is the sort of the conversation around work-life balance. It's not what I expected. When we started the whole pandemic in March, it was like, am I going to be able to have a baby and work full time and have some sanity and see my friends and all of this? And actually, I work full time right now. I've been working full time this entire time, and I elected not to take a mat leave. Um, and I thought that maybe my firm would not be so supportive of that. But because we've had so many conversations about the importance of work-life balance, and especially in, fostering good relationships in the home life while you're working from home, they've been super supportive of me working and raising a child all under one roof.
We've been doing focus groups, and one of the interesting things that we've noticed is how many mothers who are struggling, like you've all talked about in different ways, are also saying, but I don't have it that bad. I think about what others are going through, and so mine's not so bad. Or people that we're talking to truly care about wanting to make sure others are being considered and not just themselves, right? So wanting to make sure we're looking right across the board and making sure others are included. So right now, I'm interested in what you think real community care from mothers or family caregivers needs to look like. What do you think it needs to look like? And then are there things that we need to do better?
Community care during the pandemic was about just trying to survive as moms in these conditions that are definitely sort of stacked against us. And it's strange for me because I run a shelter, so that is a form of community care. And for me, it's about seeing, yes, the policy shifts that need to occur and the assistance with childcare and filling gender wage gaps in these large, giant, scary things that are hard to wrap your head around sometimes. And then paring it down in a way that's really tangible to see the cultural shift away from acknowledging that women and that moms are overstretched and need to feel better, but moving away from the expectation that we have to create that ourselves. So I think a lot of times it's really individualistic, and it's sort of pushed on, the idea that, like, I don't know, if I listen to my favorite CD on the drive home from work, that's going to be restorative. And then I get home and my dishes still aren't done and my dog is still not walked, and it's still been a 12-hour day and I haven't spent time with my kids. And so I feel like we want overstretched moms to feel better, but without necessarily having to create that themselves. So for community, it's been like looking at everything from having joined online community mom groups, which is something that never in a million years would I have thought that I do. So it's been reaching out and creating social connection in a different way, I think, than we are before. And then a big one for me is the idea of just maintaining those connections, and then making sure that our policies are also reflecting the cultural shift. And for me, the cultural shift is looking at Chelsea, who is sitting there working diligently, with her child with her. And I think back to 10 years ago when I would like hide in my office and I was exclusively pumping. And I would like pump, 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 and try and be done in between meetings, because God forbid anybody knew that I still had to do this thing that, kept my kid alive. And so it's nice to see that it's the stigma, I guess, is lifting on that a bit, if that makes sense.
The pandemic has definitely made it more acceptable for your kids to come in and out of your Zoom calls, right? It's no one before it would be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, or you would apologize. But now it's like, oh yeah, they're in the background. I have them, and we're all at home, virtual school. And so it's definitely more, everyone is more accepting of the different circumstances that we might be in. And then I feel like in terms of what real community care needs to look like, it's support, support, support for women. I can't stress that enough in every sense of the word. If be it from, like a new immigrant point of view, like access to childcare on demand that will not necessarily break the bank. Just sometimes you just need an hour or two or a bit longer, but knowing that, that access to childcare, in a safe and secure environment that you are comfortable with, having those types of places available, and a bit of awareness, about community care, around where we stay, that, look, it's okay as a mom to want these things or to have these problems, or to want to reach out to connect with other people, and there are places where you can get that kind of support without being put in some kind of stereotype. So I think support, access to childcare, and like empathy from everyone. And then maybe also, just to wrap it up, like trying to move the message from the challenges, the problems, the stress, and I think that's what the Canadian Women's Foundation is doing, and trying to shift the focus to what can be done. How can we make this a success story for all of us? How can we support each other? How can we have that happy ending despite everything that is going on in the pandemic? I know there are different measures of what success is or happiness is to different people, but just trying to set up those structures so that we can shift the story and just be happy.
I just recently started doing a gratitude journal. So every night I sort of write 3 to 5 things that I'm, grateful for. And it's really gotten me to think differently about, I have a roof over my head. I've got food on the table. I still have a job right now. And then I often think, you know, I don't have it that bad, and I think about all the other mothers that are out there and whatnot. But I think one of the important things is that regardless of your situation, there is always going to be a form of caregiver fatigue. There's going to be postpartum depression or baby blues, or even just in general fatigue, or for instance, video fatigue is something that has been talked about a lot. This kind of way that we interact now. And so in general, it doesn't matter the situation that that one is in, we all need to recognize that life has thrown us a big curveball, and how we're going to. Yeah, he agrees with that.
He does.
Of course, this is when you cry. Hey, doesn't matter the situation that one is in. We all
Yes.
need to recognize that asking for help and needing help is normal, and it's not to be diminished by any means.
So I just want to reiterate how thankful we are to Soala, to Chelsea, Lady, and Andrea Dix for taking time out of their busy schedules to talk with us about these critical issues. I'm going to turn it back to Suzanne.
Thanks, Andrea. And speaking of thank you, I want to give special thanks to a company called Hard Work Club and their partners, which donated their time to create a beautiful vision for the Mother Rising campaign. We're so incredibly thankful for their support. And their work on the Mother Rising could not have come at a better time. As you heard in this video, Canada needs to engage in a national dialogue about what the pandemic has done for mothers and family caregivers, especially those who are racialized, discriminated against, those who live in unsafe homes, and those who are in precarious situations. I'm going to share some of those stories with you now. Ingrid Mendez, the executive director at Watari Counseling and Support Services in BC, runs programs that are funded by the Canadian Women's Foundation and supports mothers and women who are undocumented or have precarious immigration status. She told us, women who are here with precarious immigration status or who are undocumented are always dealing with stress due to their immigration status. They're fearful of accessing services or support because they feel like whoever they get in touch with will be calling the Canadian Border Services Agency on them and their families. Ingrid goes on to say, as migrants, we need to start making Canada a better place by recognizing the rights of Indigenous people and thanking them for allowing us to live, play, and work on their unceded and ancestral territories. And we need to learn from elders and knowledge keepers how to do better care for the land and follow their lead in everything we do. That's very powerful. Thank you, Ingrid. We also heard from a mother of 2 young kids in New Brunswick. She said, I work in a hostile and racist environment that leaves me feeling vulnerable and unsafe. I'm a single Black mother and I need my job to pay and sustain mine and my children's lives. I want better opportunities for work in environments that are anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and safe. Income barriers mean that we are stuck with employers who will hire us, especially in small communities where we are often the only one of our kind. You cannot burn bridges because everyone knows you. More opportunities for women to start their own businesses, as well as meaningful support and mentorship, would mean we can augment our income and create ways to break away from majority white-centered spaces. Now I'm going to share a story with you of a woman with 2 kids in Ontario who's also caring for her father-in-law. She says, it's been very trying. Along with children being at home, I have a manipulative husband and a sick father-in-law. I barely have time to look for a job. I've gotten ill many times due to these stresses, along with worries for my future. My escape has always been work or school, and those just aren't available right now. I would consider leaving my abusive situation if I had a safe place, financial support, and help in place. And finally, here's one last story from a woman in Manitoba with 2 young kids. She said, I have been, not all of the time, but a lot more, locked in with a partner who goes between being kind and being abusive at a moment's notice. There has been little elsewhere to escape to. It's because of stories and situations like this that the Canadian Women's Foundation exists. If you're able to make a gift to support our work, we would be very grateful. Please go to themotherrising.ca to give online. You will support women, girls, and gender diverse people as they move out of violence, out of poverty, and into confidence and leadership. Please donate today. The link is below, and you can also find the link in our chat. We have a few more words to wrap up, but first I want to ask a question to all of you. And I'd like you to actually answer this one in the chat box. So different than a poll, in the chat box. Please let us know if there's one one thing you could have to support your future, what would it be? So that question is, if there's one thing you could have to support you in the future, what would that be? As you write your suggestions in the chat, I'd also like to share with you what others like you have done so far to lift the mother rising and support families and mothers and family caregivers. Online, you have supported this campaign to the tune of thousands of watches, shares, and likes. And together we've raised more than $16,000. That's amazing. Thank you so much. But one campaign, as Paulette said, one Mother's Day, one campaign is not enough. We need to drive real change. And so our promises moving forward, as you'll remember Andrea talking about, number one, we will prepare to learn more from you in 2022. This year marks the beginning of an annual temperature check to see what's going on for mothers and family caregivers. Two, we were going to share what you have taught with us with our grantee partners in communities across the country to help them plan and adapt their services and approaches to meet your challenges right now. Three, we are going to keep this data front and center as we create long-term plans for supporting communities through granting and initiatives. This will ensure that every single dollar that you donate continues to support the most effective local solutions. And four, we're going to integrate your ideas and experiences into our systemic change efforts. This will help us improve public policy, inform government, and move us all closer to a gender equal Canada. Now, I know I've been here asking a lot from you today, and I'm going to ask a little bit more so that we can all build the gender equitable Canada we want to see. I'm going to ask you to take a minute and sign this letter to keep governments accountable to the promises they've made in the federal budget for our national childcare system. This letter signing takes less than a minute, and by checking a few boxes, you'll be able to send a letter to your government representatives to let them know that you support a national childcare system and you're going to hold them accountable to the promises they've made. We will also be sending you a link to a survey after this event. Please share your honest feedback. We serve you and we want to know how we can be better. We want to know how we can do better by you. You will have the opportunity to let us know if you'd also like to get more involved. And let me tell you, we need tireless advocates for gender equity now more than ever. And finally, one last thing I'm going to ask you to do. I'd like you to reach out to mothers, to caregivers around you. Let them know what you heard here today. Let them know that they are not alone. Tell them they deserve better and assure them that together we're going to rise up to make sure they are supported. What the pandemic has made clear is that we can't take care work for granted. We can't have mothers and family caregivers sacrifice their health and their livelihood with minimal support. We have to value their work and shift the way everything works to make it better for them. You have spoken and you deserve justice. Thank you to everyone who participated today, and have a wonderful day and a great weekend. Thank you so much.